That's right. You're a runner now. Minho will teach you. The maze, the maps, everything. Lots to learn. I expect you to work your butt off. Thomas was shocked that the idea of entering the maze again didn't frighten him all that much. He resolved to do just as Newt said, hoping it would keep his mind off things. Deeper down, he hoped to get out of the glade as much as possible. Avoiding other people was his new goal in life. The boys sat in silence, finishing their lunches until Newt finally got to what he really wanted to talk about. Crumpling his trash into a ball, he turned and looked straight at Thomas. Thomas, he began, I need you to accept something. We've heard it too many times now to deny it, and it's time to discuss it. Thomas knew what was coming, but was startled. He dreaded the words. Gally said it, Albie said it, Ben said it. The girl after we took her out of the box, she said it. He paused, perhaps expecting Thomas to ask what he meant, but Thomas already knew. They all said things were going to change. Newt looked away for a moment, then turned back. That's right. And Gally, Albie, and Ben claimed they saw you in their memories after the changing. And from what I gather, you weren't planting flowers and helping old ladies across the street. According to Gally, there's something rotten enough about you that he wants to kill you. Newt, I don't know, Thomas started, but Newt didn't let him finish. I know you don't remember anything, Thomas. Quit saying that. Don't ever say it again. None of us remember anything, and we're bloody sick of you reminding us. The point is there's something different about you, and it's time we figured it out. Thomas was overwhelmed by a surge of anger. Fine, so how do we do it? I want to know who I am just as much as anyone else, obviously. I need you to open your mind. Be honest, if anything at all seems familiar. Nothing, Thomas started, but stopped. So much had happened since arriving. He'd almost forgotten how familiar the glade had felt to him that first night, sleeping next to Chuck, how comfortable and at home he'd felt. A far cry from the terror he should have experienced. I can see your wheels spinning, Newt said quietly. Talk. Thomas hesitated, scared of the consequences of what he was about to say, but he was tired of keeping secrets. Well, I can't put my finger on anything specific, he spoke slowly, carefully. But I did feel like I'd been here before when I first got here. He looked at Newt, hoping to see some sort of recognition in his eyes. Anyone else go through that? But Newt's face was blank. He simply rolled his eyes. No, Tommy. Most of us spent a week cooking our pants and bawling our eyes out. Yeah, well, Thomas paused, upset and suddenly embarrassed. What did it all mean? Was he different from everyone else somehow? Was something wrong with him? It all seemed familiar to me, and I know I wanted to be a runner. That's bloody interesting. You examined him for a second, not hiding his obvious suspicion. Well, keep looking for it. Strain your mind. Spend your free time wondering your thoughts and think about this place. Delve inside that brain of yours and seek it out. Try, for all our sakes. I will. Thomas closed his eyes, started searching the darkness of his mind. Not now, you dumb shuck, Newt laughed. I just meant do it from now on. Free time, meals, going to sleep at night. As you walk around, train, work, tell me anything that seems even remotely familiar. Got it? Yeah, got it. Thomas couldn't help worrying that he'd thrown up some red flags for Newt and that the older boy was just hiding his concern. Good that, Newt said, looking almost too agreeable. To begin, we better go see someone. Who? Thomas asked, but knew the answer as soon as he spoke. Dread filled him again. The girl. I want you to look at her till your eyes bleed. See if something gets triggered in that shuck brain of yours. Newt gathered his lunch trash and stood up. Then I want you to tell me every single word Albie said to you. Thomas sighed, then got to his feet. Okay, he didn't know if he could bring himself to tell the complete truth about Albie's accusations, not to mention how he felt about the girl. It looked like he wasn't done keeping secrets after all. The boys walked back toward the homestead, where the girl still lay in a coma. Thomas couldn't stifle his worry about what Newt was thinking. He'd opened himself up, and he really liked Newt. If Newt turned on him now, Thomas didn't know if he could handle it. If all else fails, Newt said, interrupting Thomas's thoughts, we'll send you to the grievers. Get you stung so you can go through the changing. We need your memories. Thomas barked a sarcastic laugh at the idea, but Newt wasn't smiling. The girl seemed to be sleeping peacefully, like she'd wake up at any minute. Thomas almost expected the skeletal remnant of a person, someone on the verge of death, but her chest rose and fell with even breaths. Her skin was full of color. One of the medjacks was there, the shorter one. Thomas couldn't remember his name, dropping water into the comatose girl's mouth a few drips at a time. A plate and a bowl on the bedside table had the remains of her lunch, mashed potatoes and soup. They were doing everything possible to keep her alive and healthy. Hey, Clint, Newt said, sounding comfortable, like he'd stopped by to visit many times before. She surviving? Yeah, Clint answered. She's doing fine, though she talks in her sleep all the time. We think she'll come out of it soon. Thomas felt his hackles rise. For some reason, he'd never really considered the possibility that the girl might wake up and be okay, that she might talk to people. He had no idea why that suddenly made him so nervous. Have you been writing down every word she says? Clint nodded. Most of it's impossible to understand, but yeah, when we can. Newt pointed at a notepad on the nightstand. Give me an example. Well, the same thing she said when we pulled her out of the box about things changing, other stuff about the creators and how it all has to end. And Clint looked at Thomas as if he didn't want it to continue in his company. It's okay. He can hear whatever I hear, Newt assured him. Well, I can't make it all out, but Clint looked at Thomas again. She keeps saying his name over and over. Thomas almost fell down at this. Would the references to him never end? How did he know this girl? It was like a maddening itch inside his skull that wouldn't go away. Thanks, Clint, Newt said, in what sounded to Thomas like an obvious dismissal. Get us a report of all that, okay? Will do. The medjack nodded at both of them and left the room. Pull up a chair, Newt said, as he sat on the edge of the bed. Thomas, relieved that Newt still hadn't erupted into accusations, grabbed the one from the desk and placed it right next to where the girl's head lay. He sat down, leaning forward to look at her face. Anything ring a bell? Newt asked. Anything at all? Thomas didn't respond, kept looking, willing his mind to break down the memory barrier and seek out this girl from his past. He thought back to those brief moments when she'd opened her eyes right after being pulled out of the box. They'd been blue, richer in color than the eyes of any other person he could remember seeing before. He tried to picture those eyes on her now as he looked at her slumbering face, melding the two images in his mind. Her black hair, her perfect white skin, her full lips. As he stared at her, he realized once more how truly beautiful she was. Stronger recognition briefly tickled the back of his mind, a flutter of wings in a dark corner, unseen, but they're all the same. It lasted only an instant before vanishing into the abyss of his other captured memories, but he had felt something. I do know her, he whispered, leaning back in his chair. It felt good to finally admit it out loud. Newt stood up. What? Who is she? No idea, but something clicked. I know her from somewhere. Thomas rubbed his eyes, frustrated that he couldn't solidify the link. Well, keep bloody thinking. Don't lose it. Concentrate. I'm trying. Shut up. Thomas closed his eyes, searched the darkness of his thoughts, seeking her face in that emptiness. Who was she? The irony of the question struck him. He didn't even know who he was. He leaned forward in his chair and took a deep breath, then looked at Newt, shaking his head in surrender. I just don't. Teresa. Thomas jolted up from the chair, knocked it backwards, spun in a circle, searching. He had heard. What's wrong? Newt asked. Did you remember something? Thomas ignored him, looked around the room in confusion, knowing he'd heard a voice, then back at the girl. He sat back down, leaning forward, staring at the girl's face. Newt, did you just say something before I stood up? No. Of course not. Oh, I just thought I heard something. I don't know. Maybe it was in my head. Did she say something? Her? No. Why? What'd you hear? Thomas was scared to admit it. I swear I heard a name. Teresa. Teresa? No, I didn't hear that. Must have sprung loose from your bloody memory blocks. That's her name, Tommy. Teresa. Has to be. Thomas felt odd, an uncomfortable feeling like something supernatural had just occurred. It was, I swear I heard it, but in my mind, man, I can't explain it. Thomas. This time he jumped from the chair and scrambled as far from the bed as possible, knocking over the lamp on the table. It landed with the crash of broken glass. A voice, a girl's voice, whispery, sweet, confident. He'd heard it. He knew he'd heard it. What's bloody wrong with you? Newt asked. Thomas's heart was racing. He felt the thumps in his skull. Acid boiled in his stomach. She's freaking talking to me. In my head. She just said my name. What? I swear. The world spun around him, pressed in, crushing his mind. I'm hearing her voice in my head or something. It's not really a voice. Tommy, sit your butt down. What are you bloody talking about? Newt, I'm serious. It's not really a voice, but it is. Tom, we're the last ones. It'll end soon. It has to. The words echoed in his mind, touched his eardrums. He could hear them. If they didn't sound like they were coming from the room, from outside his body, they were literally in every way inside his mind. Tom, don't freak out on me. He put his hands up to his ears, squeezed his eyes shut. It was too strange. He couldn't bring his rational mind to accept what was happening. My memory's fading already, Tom. I won't remember much when I wake up. We can pass the trials. It has to end. They sent me as a trigger. Thomas couldn't take it anymore. Ignoring Newt's questions, he stumbled to the door and yanked it open, stepped into the hall, ran down the stairs. Out the front door he ran, but it did nothing to shut her up. Everything is going to change, she said. He wanted to scream, run until he could run no more. He made it to the east door and sprinted through it, out of the glade, kept going through corridor after corridor, deep into the heart of the maze, rules or no rules, but he still couldn't escape the voice. It was you and me, Tom. We did this to them. To us.